Let's now shift our attention to what is unfolding in the Netherlands, where the controversial politician from Netherlands, Geert Wilders, his election win has now been confirmed. The election committee has said that Geert Wilders and his PVV Freedom Party has now won 37 seats in the 150-seat parliament. And now Wilders faces an uphill task to forge a coalition, as some parties are extremely uncomfortable with his far-right anti-Islam agenda. If Geert Wilders manages to build some kind of a governing coalition, then he would become the country's first far-right prime minister in the highly volatile Dutch political system. And it will be very unusual if the elections are not followed by months of horse trading to form a coalition. Now, Geert Wilders is, of course, aiming for a four-way coalition with the centre-right VVD, which is the current ruling party of Prime Minister Mark Rutte. And apart from the ruling party, Geert Wilders is also hoping to find some kind of common ground with the pro-reform New Social Contract and the BBB Farmers Party. And according to the State Council, to form a stable coalition, he'll need at least about 76 seats. And the world is, of course, watching very closely the developments in the Netherlands, as Geert Wilders and his very controversial party, the PVV Freedom Party, are now trying to form their government for the very first time. Their partners are wary of his strident anti-Islam and anti-immigrant and anti-European agenda. Now, Geert Wilders, on his part, has in fact urged everyone to come to the table to solve the problems that are plaguing Netherlands. But a lot of people within Netherlands feel that he's actually a part of the problem and not the solution. It's also added that a deal could, of course, be clinched in a couple of weeks' time if everyone is prepared to make compromises. All right, now to give us more perspective in terms of what, of course, is happening at this moment in the Netherlands, we're being joined by our correspondent Alex Kadia, who's joining us live from Brussels. Now, Alex, the individual that we're talking about, Geert Wilders, he's a very controversial and a very polarizing figure, but he appears to be one step closer to heading a coalition that could actually lead the Netherlands government. But give us a sense of how he's perceived within the other political parties with whom he wants to forge a coalition.
Well, what's interesting about Geert Wilders is that he's actually outlasted and outlived most other politicians in Dutch politics. He is the longest serving member of the Dutch parliament, and that really gives you a perspective of how long and difficult his road to electoral success has been. It's been a slow and steady increase. He's been isolated, pushed away by the other parties at every election until this one, back in 2021, back in 2017, all the way back to 2006 when he ran for the first time. He was very much seen as an outlier, as an extreme politician who had views that were not compatible with those mainstream parties. And as you mentioned, the Dutch political system is very much based on coalition building. Geert Wilders had a successful election this time with 37 seats. That gives you a perspective. When you need 76 seats to form a majority, that's how much it relies on coalition building. And that's part of the reason why Mark Rutte, who's been Prime Minister since 2010, has been so successful. But until now, the other parties certainly saw the Freedom Party, saw Geert Wilders as an outlier, as an outsider, as someone who had far too extreme views to be in government, and still now they find it very difficult to contemplate the idea of working with him. The VVD party that you mentioned, the outgoing party of government, who had a terrible election, who came in third, they said they are willing to provide support for a minority government led by Geert Wilders on the condition that they do not serve in cabinet. So they would support him in parliament, but would not be part of his government, keeping a distance there again. And then the New Social Contract Party, led by Pieter Omtzigt, who's been an MP for the Christian Democrat Party. He says he doesn't want to work with Wilders because his anti-Islamic propositions are anti-constitutional in the Netherlands. Absolutely.
Now, the fact that Geert Wilders has got this very clear anti-Islam and anti-immigrant agenda, that's something that's very well known. But also for people watching this election from outside of the Netherlands, the aspect of Geert Wilders, who also happens to be anti-EU. And this, of course, is likely to pose a huge headache both for people within Netherlands and indeed for the larger European Union. How is that being perceived then?
Well, that's an interesting angle, actually. It's an interesting question, because if you look at the polling, a lot of the people who voted for the Freedom Party, who voted for Geert Wilders, weren't necessarily Eurosceptic themselves, or didn't necessarily support Nexit, the Netherlands exit of the European Union. So Geert Wilders will have to compromise. If he wants the support of the centre-right outgoing party of government, he will have to abandon the idea of leaving the European Union, or certainly holding a referendum on that. Now, that might seem like a good thing for pro-EU people, pro-EU politicians and for people here in Brussels, but actually it will mean that you will have another Eurosceptic leader or head of government in Brussels. There will be less support for big EU spending from the Netherlands, perhaps, and less enthusiastic support from the Dutch government towards EU policies, EU enlargement. And on that, he might be able to find a coalition with that new social contract party. Pieter Omtzigt, who we just mentioned, who got 20 seats, said that he is against further integration of the EU. So Geert Wilders will have to compromise to form a government. There's no question about that if he wants to build that coalition. But one thing on which he will agree with the new centrist party is actually that certain level of Euroscepticism. So certainly here in Brussels, there's a real concern about a Wilders government, what that might mean for one of the founding members of the EU in the Netherlands.
Absolutely, indeed. We'll, of course, be watching this very closely. Thank you very much indeed, Alex Cadier, for joining us and getting us those updates from Brussels there. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.